Hey guys, what's up? This is Dr. Tim Jackson, DPT, with the next episode of the Boss Body podcast. Today, I'm going to be doing a solo cast where I talk about all things mitochondria. So, the mitochondria we've heard of, the batteries of the cell. It produces ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. But we're going to talk about a comprehensive approach to restoring mitochondrial function and how to know if you have mitochondrial dysfunction in the first place. So if you go back to episode 2, which is where I interviewed Ari Witten, we discussed at great length mitochondrial health and the cell danger response. So initially, mitochondria can have one of two states of being. And that one of those is to produce ATP, and the other is to alert your other cells of danger. And so that response is called or referred to as the cell danger response. And it's not a situation where one is 100% in the ATP producing state or in the cell or cellular defense state. It's more like 70, 30, 80, 20. So what is the cell danger response? It prepares all the body's resources for fighting pathogens, infections, mold toxicity. So any virus, any stealth bacteria, any fungus or yeast, those or mycoplasma, cell wall deficient bacteria can all do or activate the cell danger response. And so when that happens, your body is going to produce less ATP. What does that mean for you? It can start out as brain fog, memory issues. So the brain and central nervous system have the highest concentration of mitochondria in the body, followed by the heart. So you could have heart palpitations if you have decreased ATP in the mitochondria. You could have decreased cardiac output, the number of liters of blood that the heart pumps per minute should be 5 liters per minute. And so we have neurological signs and symptoms. We have cardiovascular signs and symptoms. We have just overall decreased physical energy, as well as decreased creativity, motivation, and even poor sleep, which is counterintuitive because you think if we produce more energy, it's going to keep us awake. But sleep is actually a very energy intensive process. So that's when most of our detoxification, regeneration, and repair take place during the stages of deep sleep. And so if we're not getting deep sleep, then we're never going to repair and be able to regenerate. So mitochondrial health is of utmost importance. And so what we refer to oftentimes as mitochondrial dysfunction is actually mitochondrial function. And I think Ari Witten mentioned this on episode 2. But if the cell danger response is activated, that is the mitochondria doing their job. We have to remove the pathogens, the metals, the other environmental toxicants that may activate the cell danger response. That's our job. That's where functional medicine practitioners, health coaches, nutritionists, acupuncturists come in. So you can have a number of different symptoms all related to mitochondrial dysfunction. And typically first, you're going to see them in the brain and central nervous system, followed by the cardiovascular system, and possibly even in the gut and liver. And so those are the 3 most common places that you see them. You also have reduced energy to exercise or engage in physical activity, and a decreased ability to recover from that exercise. And so you'll have increased soreness and need an extended recovery time. So hopefully you guys can work on these things, decrease the activation of the cell danger response, and that's going to increase your overall health and well-being. The more symptoms you have and the more systems in the body, the more likely there is to be a mitochondrial component. So if you picture someone in ICU with multi-organ end organ failure, that is mitochondrial dysfunction at its worst. if you think about an Olympic athlete winning the gold medal, that's very successful and optimized mitochondrial health. So always keep that in mind. So mitochondria, again, to summarize, can produce ATP, or they can signal the body that there's a danger and a threat, and we need to address that. So we need to remove the stressors that are triggering that cell danger response. And so a lot of times people get caught up when they're working on their mitochondrial health or biohacking. They're doing red light therapy, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, or molecular hydrogen, but they may only be seeing marginal results. And that's because they're still in that cell danger response. And in general, I evaluate people and help them address their stealth pathogens, mold, mycotoxins, environmental toxicants, and we get rid of those and turn off the cell danger response. There are some indirect tests that you can do for the cell danger response. I generally don't recommend them unless you really just want to spend money on testing, because at the end of the day, you have to evaluate these situations causing or activating the cell danger response in the first place. So the ways to fix the mitochondria that I employ in my practice and with my clients: number one, getting rid of the environmental toxicants that can lodge themselves in the mitochondrial membrane, such as heavy metals, mercury, toxic metals, aluminum, lead, mycotoxins, which are a huge threat from water damaged buildings. And most of the time you don't see or smell the mycotoxins that you're breathing in. So you need to have a urine mycotoxin test, and that can tell you the level of your body burden of mycotoxins. So getting rid of environmental toxicants and stealth pathogens that can damage the mitochondria, adding in phospholipids such as phosphatidylcholine, and specifically there's a product called NT Factor Energy, and that product helps to add back the healthy fats in the mitochondrial membrane and replace them with fats that may have been oxidized or damaged, and that's leading to decreased ATP production. So removing environmental toxicants and stealth pathogens, optimizing mitochondrial ATP production through supplementation, which can be substrates like Coenzyme Q10, L-Carnitine. And so those are two supplements that are commonly recommended to improve mitochondrial health, and they can be helpful if that is the source of the issue. But the source of the issue can also be things such as, chronic stress, emotional and psychological stress tend to turn down the amount of energy the mitochondria produce within about 2 minutes of becoming stressed out. So addressing your stress, optimizing your circadian rhythms, your light and dark cycles, making sure you're getting morning and evening sunlight whenever possible. When it's not possible for you to get it outside, supplementing with vitamin D or using a sun lamp that mimics a small percentage of the sun. But when given the opportunity, try to get it, the natural way from the sun. So we have removing environmental toxicants, stressors, stealth pathogens. We have optimizing the mitochondrial membrane with healthy fats. So NT Factor Energy, phosphatidylcholine. And then we have adding in antioxidants such as glutathione and SOD. SOD stands for superoxide dismutase. So what that's going to do, those two molecules, they're like the bodyguards for the mitochondria. So the bodies and the cells are going to naturally produce a certain amount of free radicals. When we don't have enough antioxidants, we can't quench those free radicals. And so that leads to damage in the mitochondrial membrane and other parts of the cell. And so the glutathione and the superoxide dismutase, those are going to protect the mitochondria from getting damaged in the first place. So it's really a three-pronged approach. It's not just adding in CoQ10, L-Carnitine, things of that nature, but it's protecting the mitochondria, removing the stressors, and recreating the mitochondrial membrane, reconstituting the mitochondrial membrane with healthy fats. So it's really a three-pronged approach. Another great approach that falls into the category of antioxidants. It's a potent antioxidant, but it also stimulates the production of new mitochondria as well as repairing the mitochondria you already have, and that's molecular hydrogen. There's a ton of research on molecular hydrogen. Most of it has been done in Asian countries. I personally have a molecular hydrogen machine that allows me to make the water, to breathe the gas through the nasal cannula, and even wear goggles to improve eyesight. It's a very potent molecule. It's very small, but that's a good thing. It's able to actually get into the mitochondria, which is where we need it to be. And so molecular hydrogen can help a multitude of issues, mainly by decreasing inflammation and enhancing mitochondrial function. So other therapies that are common for mitochondrial health, or biohacking that's common for mitochondrial health, red light therapy is extremely common. Red light therapy, it stimulates the mitochondria to produce more ATP, and we're basically using an external environmental input to increase a biochemical process, in this case, ATP energy production. So by doing that, we are able to have healthier cells, healthier tissues, and ultimately a healthier body. So red light therapy, you can get whole body panels. You can get panels that do spot treatment or only cover a small portion of your body at a time. Usually a combination of red and near infrared is going to be the best, because the near infrared is going to increase the depth of penetration of the light. So red light therapy, cryotherapy, while it's not generally considered a mitochondrial therapy, it can certainly have positive benefits on the mitochondria via decreasing inflammation and activating fat tissue in the body. So that's also going to help balance the autonomic nervous system, which will improve mitochondrial function. So we have molecular hydrogen, we have phospholipid therapy, whether oral or taken via IV. You can do IVs of things such as phosphatidylcholine, glutathione pushes. Those all benefit the mitochondria. And then we have external environmental inputs, red light therapy, near infrared light therapy, and other treatments that will address pathogens and mold. So a good detox protocol that gets your bile and your lymphatic fluid moving and making sure that your bowels are moving twice a day. That allows us to get rid of environmental toxicants, and those are what damage the mitochondria in the first place. So if we can do that, that's going to lead to increased tissue function and eventually increased healing capacity. So a lot of people don't heal from whatever issue. You can pick really any issue because they don't have enough energy. They're not producing enough energy at the cellular level. So once you do that, once you increase the amount of energy they're able to produce, they're able to start healing. And so mitochondria work best when they are protected by antioxidants. So you can supplement with those orally or topically, intranasally, or in IV form if you have access to that, although it's not necessary in most cases. So we have the external environmental inputs, the phospholipid therapy for the mitochondrial membrane, detoxification, and molecular hydrogen. And so those are the primary ways that I go about addressing mitochondrial health and improving mitochondrial function. Sometimes looking at the hormonal system or the endocrine system also plays a major role in mitochondrial health. So you have the adrenals and stress hormones such as cortisol. You don't want cortisol to be too high, so it gets a bad rap. We hear about cortisol being too high, and that's definitely a problem when it's too high. But you also don't want it to be too low. You need a certain amount of cortisol for the body to function. Without it, you die. So that's known as Addison's, and it's very, very serious, especially if you've heard of people who are on prednisone and instead of tapering, they stop abruptly, you could potentially die. So you always want to work with your doctor carefully if you're on prednisone or anything of that nature. But overall, I would say that the adrenals and thyroid hormones are incredibly important to mitochondrial health. So if you improve mitochondrial health, it can help hormonal production. But you have to have a certain baseline level of hormonal production to stimulate the mitochondria to do their jobs. So a certain level of cortisol, a certain level of T3, triiodothyronine, the active version of thyroid hormone, and T2. T2 goes into the mitochondria. It increases energy production without stimulating the cardiovascular system. We don't hear much about T2. We hear mostly about T4 and T3, but T2 is just as, if not more important than those guys, and it works at the level of the mitochondria. In addition, some of the sex hormones, especially testosterone, plays an important role in several steps of the electron transport chain and in the Krebs cycle, the TCA cycle. And so that's one way that testosterone leads to increased energy. Okay, it's both direct and indirect. So how do you know if you have mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, even for people who've been working on their mitochondria for a while, it's still likely that you have some degree of mitochondrial dysfunction or function, depending on how you look at it. But you can address it and start getting better. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but there are plenty of therapies out there to address it. And we covered, environmental inputs, the phospholipid recomposition or reconstitution of the mitochondrial membrane, protecting the mitochondrial membrane with antioxidants, and removing the environmental stressors and stealth pathogens like mycotoxins, bacteria, mycoplasma, viruses, etc. And the term for that, it's often referred to as microbial mitochondropathies. So you have microbes that are physically causing harm and damage to the mitochondria. So let's talk about when and how to biohack your mitochondria. So if you are doing any sort of mitochondrial therapies or treatments and you're not receiving as much benefit as you think you should, you may want to evaluate and be tested for any stealth pathogens in your body, because that can derail the best biohacks, whether it's red light therapy, cryotherapy, molecular hydrogen, CoQ10, carnitine, oxaloacetate. All of those supplements and therapies can work, but they will work much better if you can eradicate the pathogens first. And so if you're doing cryotherapy or red light therapy and you're getting some benefit, but not as much as you'd like, you may want to have, your titers for the most common pathogens such as Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, HHV6, mycoplasma, Lyme, Babesia bartonella, Candida, and your level of mycotoxins and heavy metals tested. Another test that I often use is an organic acids test. And on there are different mitochondrial markers, such as lactate, pyruvate, etc. But there are also your levels of coenzyme Q10 and some other B vitamins, such as B5, which is needed to transport fatty acids into the inner mitochondrial membrane. So if you're low in those, your mitochondria won't function as well. And we want to produce more on our own. So that goes back to the methylation pathway. So methylation is simply having one carbon, 3 hydrogens, and adding that group onto a substance, a hormone, a molecule, or other substrate. And so if we methylate better, meaning we use B9, which is methylfolate, B12, and all the other B vitamins, we can produce more CoQ10 on our own. And so supplementing with CoQ10 is fine. It's one of the first line therapies for people with cardiovascular issues. but it can get expensive. If you're taking it, make sure you take it with a fat-containing meal, and that will go a long way towards increasing absorption. And there are some other tests out there that not a ton of people or the average person knows about. Armin, ARMIN Labs in the UK, they have a few tests specific to mitochondrial function because of the work of Dr. Sarah Myhill in the UK. So you could check those out and you may have access to those. Another is a bioelectrical impedance analysis test, where waves or wavelengths are sent up through your tissues, and depending on the phase angle, it can indicate optimal mitochondrial function or subpar mitochondrial function. So the organic acids test, the bioelectrical impedance analysis examination, and some of the other tests such as the Armin Labs, that can also help to give us an idea of the amount of ATP your mitochondria are producing and how well those antioxidants are functioning to protect your mitochondria from damage in the first place. And last but not least, stress mitigation. So stress in any of its forms, but especially emotional, psychological, spiritual, those can all lead to decreased energy production in the mitochondria. So you can't eradicate all stress, but you can mitigate and eradicate some of it. And so doing a little bit of stress mitigation will go a long, long way. There are other treatments that you can do for mitochondrial health, some that are a little more expensive and a little more esoteric, but we've covered here the basics today. You always want to start with a great foundation and get rid of those environmental toxicants, protect the mitochondria with antioxidants, reconstitute the membrane with healthy fats, and get rid of those stealth pathogens and any mycotoxins. That will take your mitochondria from here to here. So you're going to take it up at least 2 or 3 levels. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Was this helpful? What questions do you have? Feel free to write in to the bossbodypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you liked about the episode or what you didn't like and what you'd like for me to cover in the future. Till next time, take care and thank you very much.